Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just vile and base.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. I am the bombastically braggadocious Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who personally taught Jordan Belfort everything he knows about the stock market, Mr. Ryan Seabold!
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
It's going well, man. I'm sure that things are going much better for you financially and with all of your portfolios, having learned from someone who really understands financial manipulation the way that Jordan Belfort does. I gotta tell you, man, my stocks have been getting absolutely hammered. My crypto investments have been getting hammered. So, I suppose, if anything, maybe you can sort of help us out, give us some tricks, tell us a little bit about what you taught to old Jordan Belfort there.
Lying through your teeth, cheating, stealing with both hands, and just absolute unabashed corruption is going to get you far in this world, my friend. I think you're just trying to play by the rules too much.
That is a problem. Yeah, I have been, just trying not to utilize insider information and all of that. So,
let me tell you, gotta lie, you gotta cheat, you gotta steal. Just live like there's no tomorrow. This is the mantra of success. You just gotta, don't I'm gonna go log on and invest money in this stuff. No, in fact. I've even gone a step further now to where I'm just like stealing purses from old ladies on the street. I've even gone way past the stock market. I'm going deep investing, Wolf of Wall Street. I'm the Wolf of Tampa, Florida. Not even sheep's clothing. I will come behind your grandma. I'll push her on the ground and I'll take her purse. It's a great investment. I mean, it costs me nothing. There's no overhead in it.
Well, and that's interesting that you bring that up, because I had heard that there was sort of like this scheme that you were running on like older people, and elderly people. I assumed it was kind of like some sort of like shifty stock manipulation, give us your bank details, etc. But it's sounding more and more like, I don't know if this is the same thing, but it's sounding more and more like maybe what I thought was that is actually this sort of physical crime spree you're talking about?
From blue chip stocks to broken hip stocks. I mean, there is just no shortage of old people in Florida. We're God's waiting room. And it's ripe for the taking. Sorry, Graham, you're going down. You're going down, bitch.
Now, I do want to go back to something, because I know that Jordan Belfort on one of his promotional tours was talking about like this particular scheme that he had developed on old people in Florida. And I had always thought that like you were probably the one that taught him that. Would you mind letting us know, if not that scheme, perhaps maybe some other schemes that somebody who wanted to get started on swindling old people in Florida, where would it be a good place for them to start?
So, one of the biggest investments you can make in the state of Florida that is just low cost, low risk, low investment, but real big payoff are those little strawberry candies that you can't find anywhere that are always in the candy dish at your grandma's house.
Oh yeah, those are delicious. I love those.
Right. So I've started an importing.
And why can't I find those anywhere? Those literally were only at my grandma's house.
Because I have bought them all. I have a corner on the market, on the strawberry candy market. I have started an importing-exporting business on these little strawberry candies and the appropriate dishes that they come in. It's kind of like a free gift that I give if you invest so much money. It's a bit of a tiered service that I do, but you put so much money into the candies and then you get the dish for free. But yeah, man, the Villages, Sarasota, North Miami, Boca Raton. I'm huge in Boca Raton in the strawberry candy market. Ain't nobody gonna fuck with me. And I'm telling you, man, you can't find them anywhere, to your point, because I've started importing them. They're coming from Prague, believe it or not. Huge strawberry candy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm importing them from Prague. And, they say that Prague is one of the happiest places on earth that you could live, from what I understand. It's the quality of life there is so high. And I've directly correlated that to the strawberry candy market that they've got there. And so I've started importing that all here to Florida. They are laced with a little bit of fentanyl, which, does get people hooked. I know. It's a risk reward thing. Unfortunately,
that's like such a southward turn there.
Well,
everything was so like, I've got visions of grandma. I'm smelling the strawberry candies. Now all of a sudden here they are laced with fentanyl.
Well, I mean,
jeez.
This is kind of this is the Jordan Belfort side of it, right? This is. What we've described so far is Mary Kay, Mona V, Amway, but where we're getting into the dark side of it is the addictive nature of these strawberry candies that will eventually take my empire down. But in the interim, I'm doing very well financially. I can't keep people off of these strawberry candies. And, one of the unfortunate side effects is it has driven people somewhat mad. You hear about Florida Man and stuff like that. That does happen. I could take credit for probably about 70 to 80% of these things. It also got Ron DeSantis elected and Governor Rick Scott before that. So there are some unfortunate
I'll never eat another
things.
strawberry candy again.
There are some unfortunate side effects, but hey, I'm just here to tell you, it started in the gram pushing down blue hip market, and then I've kind of taken those proceeds and invested it in the strawberry candy importing and exporting biz. But I'll send you some if you want to get some for yourself to keep around the house. They're very delicious.
Publicly, I will say that you can hold on to them. Privately, I will say, let me DM you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wait, you know what? Yeah, no, I think that is actually, if I heard correctly, that's the sound of another listener mailbox from the Esoterica Cinema hotline.
Listener mailbox. I'm just going to keep doing that.
Every time, dude. I love it so much.
Absolutely, buddy.
And now, here's the thing. So this time, last week we had a couple of yucksters calling in and,
crazy kids
just giving us the business, as they say, right? This time we actually had someone listen to the episode and call in afterwards. So
could you imagine?
This is actually, I know, right? So for anybody listening who listened to Amadeus and for anybody who didn't, there is a scene in the movie that we discussed on the episode that is in the director's cut, and it's not in the original cut. It involves Stanzi, who is Mozart's wife, and a move that Salieri made to sort of play her in a number of different ways, right? So we're going to go ahead. Let's listen to caller Brendan give us his thoughts on that scene.
Jason and Ryan, what's up? It's Brendan from LA. Huge fan of the show. I often listen, wanting to be part of the conversation. And so I'm driving around in Hollywood right now. Thought I'd leave some thoughts on Amadeus, the director's cut, and I'll try to be brief. First of all, I love this movie. This movie is, I long for the days of when you could take something so cinematically and aesthetically seriously while no one even tries to have an actual accent of wherever they're from, except for Grazie, Signori. That's like the one thing. And it's like F. Murray Abraham is acting in a completely different movie from everybody else. So, I mean, Jeffrey Jones, come on. Anyway, the thing is, I love both versions of the movie to death. It's just that I consider them completely different experiences altogether. And, of course, with the director's cut, yeah, you have a couple of the opera segments that go on a little long, and there's some scenes like with Mozart giving lessons that was cut out. And, you know, it's a director's cut, so there's going to be some stuff, you know, I mean, the theatrical cut definitely trims the fat. But, of course, the notorious scene of the director's cut, which turns it from PG to hard R, is, of course, the scene where Mozart's wife, attempts to pay off his debts with Salieri and, disrobes and does her thing. So it turns into a hard R. But the thing is, with this, somebody's honking. Of course, it's Hollywood. The thing with this scene, it changes the character of Salieri completely. Whereas, he in the theatrical version, he's not the evil guy. He's not the bad guy in the movie. And essentially, Mozart is the really obnoxious guy. Salieri in the director's cut, because he seduces or essentially wants to, exploit Stanzi for his own personal gain, thinking she won't go through with it, of course, but, he essentially humiliates her to try to pull one over on Mozart. It turns him into a much evil guy, which then when you see them meet up at the end of the movie with now having this scene and this encounter in context, shows a much more sinister relationship between Salieri and Mozart and Salieri and Stanzi. Turns Salieri into a completely, much more evil, maniacal character that has a much more vengeance with God after this. Whereas before it was really just a vengeance about music. It's a more whimsical story. Of course, there's dark themes and everything, but the director's cut just really changes the entire tone of the movie for me. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Again, love them both, and I really love the show. Love to hear you guys talk about all this. So love to hear your thoughts about this. Take care, guys.
So Ryan, this is interesting because I think, we did kind of mention as much on the episode with this, but that, if you're somebody who grew up or, had seen the film a number of times on the theatrical cut, it paints Salieri a certain way that the director's cut then, flips on its head with that scene. And that's definitely what we had here. So it's kind of interesting to hear that somebody, in fact, had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just depends on which version you saw first. So, as I stated last week, or the last episode, this was the first time I'd seen Amadeus. So I only knew it as the director's cut. So to me, removing that scene takes away some of the power Salieri has over Amadeus and Stanzi. And so it also kind of changes the dynamic, like the caller, Brendan, was saying at the end of the film, where he is with Mozart when he passes away. That becomes a completely different dynamic without that scene in it. So it is weird that, just with one brief sequence like that, how much that can change a film. It's definitely an interesting topic. I can't say one is right and one is wrong. They're just, to me, different.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I do think that's the biggest thing that we pick up is I do agree with what Brendan has to say. And the one thing that I do like about it is, the added tension at the end of the film, right? Because it brings so much more tension into the room when Stanzi comes home with the kids and Salieri's there and Mozart's dying, right?
Right.
Because of that experience that they had with one another.
Yeah, and, at the end of the day, he doesn't go through with it. It shows that, that his limitations of what he's willing to let himself do. We've all been in situations like that, right? Where you get to a point and it's like, you think you can go through with something or you feel this spite and rage. And then at the end, good prevails and you realize, whoa, this is too much, or reality sets in. You're like, ugh. So, though it does definitely change the dynamic of Salieri and makes it super awkward. At the end, I don't think it changes it so much because I think it would be different if he went through with it because as we stated in the episode, Mozart went through with it. Like he straight up, banged Salieri's chick. So yeah, who knows? I'll leave you with this. This is kind of the deciding factor for me. If you're going to call something a director's cut, to me that, entails that this is, or kind of defines that this is the director's vision that got changed somewhere along the way, but it was his intent to have a little more power. Maybe it was cut just for the rating system. Maybe that was a content issue where it's like, dude, we get titties in here. We're going to lose $5 million because that's a bunch of kids that can't see this movie type of thing. Families won't come. So, maybe this was something that he wanted and just had to cut for explicit content and a rating. Who knows? But I do appreciate the stance. I can't argue one way or another. Just, for me, I was introduced one way to it. It sounds like the caller was introduced another way. So it's an interesting discussion. I'm not sure it has a right answer.
Absolutely. And if you haven't, go ahead and go back and listen to our Amadeus episode from just 2 weeks back. And again, we would love to hear from you for anything movie related, Esoterica Cinema related, Muffin related, or like I said, anything under the sun. That number, 818-483-6285. We'll see you on that Esoterica Cinema hotline and be back next week with more calls. Well, that was our listener mailbox, and let's go ahead and get into a description of this week's film.
We have a movie to talk about today. This is Chris Nolan's student film, I guess. School of Hard Knocks. It might as well be.
Might as well be.
From 1998 or 99, depending on where you find this thing. I've seen it listed as both. The Following, or Following, I guess. I always want to put the in front of it, but it's Following by Chris Nolan.
No, that's the Kevin Bacon vehicle.
Got it. Yep.
That
then
TV
Following.
show.
Following is by Chris Nolan from 98, 99. Google has this summarized as: a young writer living in London follows people in the hope of using their lives in his novels, but the hobby becomes an obsession, and he soon finds himself going further than intended. Hey, much like me and those strawberry candies, right? That's the entire description. Sorry, did you think I was going what?
Oh, wow. I expected there to be more. I mean, having seen the movie, I understand why there's not. But no, I was normally, you go on for a solid 45 seconds, or I do. One of us does. But
no.
Okay.
You took a breather. I was like, is this an edit point? Was there a...
No, I was waiting for more here. Okay, great.
No, he went further than intended. Yeah, that's it. And hey, look, dude, the movie itself is only a little over an hour long. It was an easy watch. Had a lot of Chris Nolan tropes in it that I'm sure we're going to get to and touch on. But yeah, I don't think it needed much more of any more of a summary than that. And you're going to start giving plot points away.
All right. Well, Ryan, I also do have to express my disappointment at the lack of adherence to the format that we have worked so hard to cultivate over these many 3 seasons, because generally there is a little something that you say after you have finished the description that would key me into knowing that you're finished. But you didn't say that thing, so I was waiting.
Excuse me. Jason, what did you think about this movie?
Yes. I needed it.
Yes.
I needed that so much. Ryan, normally I would tell you right after we listen to the trailer for Following, but there is no trailer, or rather there is a trailer, and we're just deciding not to use it because you know what? It's boring. You're boring Following trailer, okay? Get more exciting, then come back to me. And while you're at it, work on the film as well. Same note. We're on to you. I actually found this movie. It's funny because I could not help but constantly go back to last week's episode of Amadeus and think of our great protagonist, Mr. Salieri, the self-described mediocrity of all mediocrities, the patron saint across the land. And that's exactly how I feel about Following, right? I mean, it is a quintessential first film. Could I have done better with the same resources? No. Is it a competent film that is solidly constructed by a person who understands cinema? Absolutely, 100%. Do I need to see it again?
Agreed.
Nope. Once was fine. Didn't hate it. Didn't love it. Respect it for what it is. It's very much, like we've talked about so many times, right? Someone's demo tapes of their band, the first short film, right? Like these things where it's like, here is a work that shows promise, and that's not without talent, but really it's just that the creator had to make this so that he could get it out of the way to make what would follow. By the way, dude, if anybody listening wants to keep track of how many Following jokes we're going to make, I think the over-under is probably 9.5. So in the following scene, wink, wink.
We have no shame. Low-hanging fruit is our favorite fruit.
It's just so easy. It's right there. I don't even have to work at it.
Like strawberry candies in a dish. Yep, absolutely.
So, that's kind of what I thought about. It sounds like you were kind of a similar mindset, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to hang your hat on with this film. Obviously, this is rife with things that we'll see future Chris Nolan doing. that the time jumps, the soundtrack and score, all these things are there were so many things I'm like, yep, that's a Chris Nolan movie. I will also give credit where due. Like, he shot this on 16 millimeter film, at 98, 97, whatever, on the weekends, because they all had day jobs at the time. So it took them over a year to make this sumbitch, if I'm not mistaken. So, shooting shit on film. This was long before the days of YouTube tutorials and digital film, where you could go grab a Blackmagic pocket cinema camera or a little mirrorless and go shoot your feature with some wireless lavs. Like, no, I mean, the audio was clean. The dialogue was great. Acting performances were good. I thought that it was just like you said, it's Play School's my first Chris Nolan movie. So, and the good part is that it's a Chris Nolan movie, but the bad part is it's my first. So yeah, more good things to come. But without this, you wouldn't have Memento. You wouldn't have, Inception or Insomnia or some of these great films that, have become a part of our lexicon and library that we have appreciated over the years. So yeah, credit where due. I did enjoy it for the building blocks that it was. I just can't watch this and get all chubbed up about it and be like, yeah, baby, following bitches. Give me that merch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there.
Probably how some of our listeners feel about this show, A lot of promise. These kids are going places. Let's let them work their way through it.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get started here. Just need you to tell me where should go here. I
mean, normally, Jason, I would say at the beginning, yeah. But in the context of this film discussion, really wherever you want. We're going to be bouncing around. So you can start at the end.
In the middle.
Fuck you. I'll start with my grade rating. You want my grade? Chris Nolan this whole episode. We'll chop it up and keep the episode, keep the listeners on their toes.
Absolutely. That definitely sounds like something you want to do. Edit everything into pieces and mix and match them. Just shake and bake all the pieces and see the way it comes out.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Well, we'll still start at the beginning of the film anyways, which is not necessarily the beginning of the story. But when the film opens, we see a man. He's applying a latex glove in extreme close-up in the grainy black and white 16mm stock that you were talking about, while repetitious and droning electronic music plays in the background. The hand is caressing a box of pictures and keepsakes and various ornaments of sorts. We're very quickly introduced to the protagonist, who we can refer to, Ryan, we'll go ahead and refer to them as Bill and Danny over the course of this episode. And just know that if we say Bill or Danny, it's the same person, which is the lead protagonist, played by a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Theobald, who, you'd think that being in Chris Nolan's first movie might get you future work. It did not in his case. Nope. He had 5 other credits. I think they were all very, very bit parts, like non-speaking roles in Chris Nolan films, probably just for posterity's sake, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's actually sitting at a Dunkin' Donuts, starts narrating the events about how he began to shadow people, and I will go ahead and actually let the film set that up, because it's actually a good explanation, so let's listen to this clip from Following.
The following is my explanation. Well, more of an account of what happened. I'd been on my own for a while and getting kind of lonely, bored. Nothing to do all day. And that's when I started shadowing.
Shadowing?
Shadowing, following. I started to follow people.
Who?
Anyone, first. That was the whole point. Somebody at random. Somebody who didn't know who I was.
And then?
And then nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. I just see where they went, what they did. Go home afterwards.
Why'd you do it?
See where they went. Anyone, how can I explain? You ever, been to a football match, just let your eyes, go over, drift across a crowd of people, and they slowly stop and fix on one person, and all of a sudden that person isn't part of the crowd anymore. They become an individual, just like that.
Now, the other voice that you heard right there in the clip is of the detective. And it's kind of funny, Ryan, because this is sort of like the second week in a row where someone interviewing someone else about past events is the narrative device of the film. We saw that in Amadeus, where the Salieri character is recounting his story to the priest. And in this one, it's actually kind of the same thing, where our protagonist, Bill, is recounting his story to this detective. And right up front, it shows a number of the techniques that Chris Nolan's going to utilize over the course of this film, right? We hear the narration, we see the handheld camera work, we notice there are multiple edits and they seem to be of kind of a strategic nature. So before we actually dive into the specifics, Ryan, let me just start by asking you, what do you think of the overall aesthetic of the film? Do you think all of those different elements, the mise en scène, if you will, right? Do you think they work, and do you think they work especially for being a very no-budget $6,000 indie film?
For starters, you're French, impeccable. Impeccable French.
Mise en scène!
Our listeners overseas are going to love you for that. So this is a film that I thought started very rough. It took me a minute for my eyes to adjust. Let me go ahead and start by saying that... Okay, so our listeners know we record these things, way in advance. We've given that disclaimer. Some of these episodes get recorded at certain times, out of order, et cetera, et cetera. I only mention that because I watched RRR literally right before watching this. So the most eye-bleeding, over-the-top maximalist cinema in recent history, RRR, the largest budget Indian film ever made, juxtaposed with the lowest budget film I may have watched, in my adult years. So it took just a minute, like walking out from your house into the sun, where it was like, like my eyes are all squinty. I'm like, oh, this sucks. Get it away. But as it went on, and the close-ups of him fiddling around in the box and all of that, and the really tight shots of the detective and the questioning, and it just felt very student filmy to me, which is fine. He's working through it. He's figuring it out. But as we get into the film more and more, and we start to get our bearings a little bit on who these characters are, he starts to shoot a little wider. I thought the film felt way more natural as we got into it. And maybe that was me adjusting to the film style, or maybe it was just straight up the film got better. But I did enjoy this the more I got into it, until the very end when I was like, okay, cool. Like, it wasn't bad. I thought when I first watched it, I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And to the point where I was even wondering, how in the fuck did Criterion even want any part to do with this? Like, of all the Chris Nolan films, like, why would they not just start with Memento and forget about this and say, well, now he's working through some things, like, let him have that one. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm convinced that a large part of Criterion's selection process has to do with the licensing rights.
Okay.
I mean, they're popular among cinephiles, but like outside of anybody who's not a cinephile is not spending the money on a Criterion collection, right? Most people don't even buy physical media, period, anymore, So all of that to say that I think that it's going to cost them a shitload of money to get Interstellar or Inception, whereas following can be had for pennies on the dollar. So I think that's a large part of why that's part of their business model, is to focus in and try to license films that aren't super popular. They have a couple exceptions, Silence of the Lambs, Do the Right Thing, Doctor Strangelove, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, I mean, many Criterion discs are films you haven't really heard of. And then, of course, it is the first film of one of today's most popular filmmakers. And so that's always going to carry a certain level of novelty, right?
Sure. Yeah. Real quick before we move on, maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't, but the detective, aforementioned detective that we mentioned, is Chris Nolan's uncle, John Nolan.
No, did not know that.
And he's gone on to be in most all of his other films.
Oh, that's cool.
as like a little bit part or extra.
Nice. Yeah. For me, I guess, thinking about the film and, what you mentioned about feeling very natural as it went forward, I think it borrowed a lot of filmmaking applications from like the French New Wave movement, which very much adhered to a lot of those similar principles, right? Like everything shot on, 16 millimeter black and white because that was what was available at the time. Everything is, it's either outdoors or indoors. Either way, they're using a lot of natural lighting. They're using largely improvised scripts, which would obviously be a big derivation here because everything Chris Nolan does is super planned out. But the sort of, I don't want to call it off-kilter editing, but the non-traditional editing, let's say, that was also heavily used during that whole period. So yeah, I think that the film owes, and it's funny because I really don't think that it was like a knowing wink. I think it was just they were in similar circumstances, the French New Wave filmmakers and Chris Nolan, in that they were in large cities with no budgets, right? And they wanted to tell very human stories, and they weren't trying to go sci-fi or overly dramatic. Just here's a slice of life for this type of person, right? And in this case, it's somebody who starts burgling. In Cleo from 5 to 7, it's a metropolitan woman, right? In Band of Outsiders, it's these two older guys, young, but like everything kind of has the same sort of like either whether they're alone or they're in duos or trios, they're all kind of these outsider loners that exist in this world that is not in sync with like the rest of the world at large, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So supposedly Chris Nolan came up with this concept, and you might know more about this than I do, but supposedly he came up with this concept after being burgled and robbed.
Correct.
And was wondering that person went through all my shit. I wonder what he thought of my shit. And so, it's all that kind of, so you're sitting at a coffee shop and you're looking out the window, and as people pass by, you start to observe, right? And it's like, I wonder what that person's deal is. And you could build a whole story in your head about this person based on the 20 seconds you saw them interact with somebody else or interact with their pet or something like that, or get into a cab, what they were carrying, what they were wearing. So I kind of feel like a lot of this style of filmmaking is, I wonder what that person's deal is, and then kind of building a whole little short story around that, and then, fleshing these characters out and going down that rabbit hole and chasing it through. So this was no exception. Yeah. I thought it was done very well for what it was. It didn't blow my mind. It wasn't groundbreaking, but again, I liked this movie more the more I got into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And our protagonist, as he's sitting here, he has this rule never to follow the same person twice. And he ends up breaking that and following this one gentleman who he's approached by in a cafe. It's a man with a briefcase. And after being grilled awkwardly for a while, the man admits that he is actually a burglar. This burglar's name is Cobb. I don't know if you saw, Ryan, that Cobb was played by a guy named Alex Haw, who pretty much this is the only acting he really ever did. And since then, he actually is known for developing this movement in architecture and art that sort of blends certain principles in utilizing natural lighting and all of this. So I guess there's this sort of modality of thought that is applied to certain types of architecture that he kind of drove. It is very interesting. I'm not really an architecture guy, so I can't really speak to it that much, but yeah, so he's you
don't say.
So he's an artist / architect, which again, just an interesting path for. Because he did fine. He looked good on film, and he seemed comfortable and confident. So just kind of interesting.
I would argue he's the best part about this whole movie.
Yeah, I agree.
He was the glue that held this whole motherfucker together. The blonde woman, who I believe remains nameless.
They actually call her the blonde in the credits. So when we say this blonde chick down the road, we're not being misogynistic. That's literally what they call her, the blonde. No. Hey, so that blonde, get over here, blonde.
Hey, we've only got an hour to work with. We can't be using things like names. What do you think? I got 2 hours? Fuck you with your names. Think I am Francis Ford Coppola over here? She's the blonde. Yeah, I thought she did fine. I thought that our main actor did fine. I thought everyone in the movie did fine. I thought the Cobb character did fantastic. I thought he was kind of the glue because he was so charismatic and on point with his delivery. Every time he came back on, he was kind of responsible for a lot of the exposition dumps because he was on both sides of this story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was very well used as a character as well. It was almost like Chris Nolan knew what he had and kind of leaned into it. He's like, nah, this is our guy. Like, let's just make sure he's in most of these scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got this sort of, ethos where he's like not in it for the money. He's not burgling because he's trying to get rich. He wants to, quote, take something away to show people what they had. And I think this is,
right.
I think this is one of those things where it's like a criminal trying to be more principled than they are or deeper than they are, right? Like I feel like it's the criminal equivalent of interpreting postmodern art. Like it's a circle on a square. It's not a metaphor for anything. It's just laziness, right? Like you can intellectualize it all you want the same way that you can intellectualize burgling people. But I think at the end of the day, you just like doing bad shit. And that's really all it comes down to.
So I'm glad you bring this up. And this is something I wasn't sure where to fit into the conversation as I kind of expected this conversation to last all of about 15 minutes. Because I don't have a lot of notes
dude.
here.
Come on. You really expected that.
Right. So one of the things I did take away from this film is the themes that it kind of portrayed. And to me, this is a film about control or power.
Sure.
And having control or power over someone else. So to me, voyeurism is a form of control or power as the all-seeing eye of sorts, or the, unspoken God archetype of just kind of not getting involved but observing, from afar and having control over the situation. But then also burgling is control. And then as you get into it, the organized crime segment and the manipulation is control, as they're starting to pull the rug out and you see the different layers of what's actually going on. Control of Cobb over the blonde, over the nameless character, the burglar guy that were our main protagonist, and so on. So, and then the cop at the end, having ultimate control over his fate. So I think it's this real turning point over who has control over who in what stage or what level. And everybody thinks that they're the ones, right? Like each one of these layers that we pile on, that character thinks they're in control and that they're, nobody, like they're the top tier. And it starts with our main character being the voyeur.
Sure.
He feels like he can't get caught. He gets a little arrogant and does get caught, but up until that point, he feels that he's in control. And then he's schooled on how to really be in control. And that's like you said, that's what we're at in this story. And then I'll toss it back to you, which is take it away. Then they realize what they've had. That's a form of power over somebody and giving them something they did not know they needed, or even to the point where, he stuffs a pair of panties into a gentleman's pants that they're burgling. Because then our main character says, why would you disrupt their relationship? Like, we've already done what we came to do. And he says, take it away, show them what they had. Again, really kind of nailing down, like, they're not after the shit. They're not even after the kink of it or the adrenaline rush. It's the control or the power of it. Feeling that they're in control over something or over somebody else.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I agree with you. I think I agree with you mostly. I think the only thing for me is like, to me, this is a little bit of that Joker psychology, right? And I think that a lot of times there's just these sort of chaos agents, right? And they get off on they get off on instituting and implementing this chaos because, to your point, it does give them that level of control. But then they always try to sermonize and they try to make it seem like it's this, oh, well, I'm trying to teach you a lesson, or there's this element of altruism, right? And like, I think it's that part of it for me that's kind of a cop-out, right? Like, I don't think that you're, I don't think that you're in it to teach people a lesson. If that was really the point, there are much healthier ways to go about it, right? Or there are less deceptive ways. Like, I think this is something where you get off on the control. All of that aspect I agree 100% on. But then I think that once they start to go to this, like, well, I'm trying to hold a mirror up to society, and it's like, no, you're not. You're just trying to use that to justify doing bad shit. That's all that is.
Right. Well, and then you're absolutely right, because so that's where we're at in this film currently, is the altruistic, sermonizing of we're trying to teach people a lesson. But the camera does zoom out several times after this to show that it actually is there are other motives to the plot, what they're trying to get, So, the burglar guy, our protagonist, the original voyeur author guy, thinks that's what he's in it for. But then, we find out that he's actually being controlled and manipulated. Who's actually being controlled and manipulated by someone else who's, actually being controlled and manipulated by someone else.
And so on and so on and so on.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey, excuse me. Yeah? I couldn't help but notice that tune that you're whistling there. What is that? Oh, it's nothing really. Just a little ditty I heard on the radio this morning. Oh, okay, no, it's just 'cause it actually sounds a lot like this song this fella was whistling the other day when he was following me around town. You don't say. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Well, no, I mean, see, it couldn't have been me because I... Oh, jeez. Quit following people around, jerk. It's creepy. Oh, it's time to face the facts, Rory. You're just no good at stalking. Imagine me, 30 years old and no good at stalking. Thank goodness Mudda can't see me now. What's a putz like me supposed to even do with himself? Due to popular demand, the makers of Encyclopedia Britannica are pleased to introduce a brand new collection catering to the needs of incels everywhere, The Stalker's Handbook. Featuring a stunning hardbound leather presentation across 13 volumes, The Stalker's Handbook allows you to express the intensity of your desires without ever having to open your mouth. We'll learn about such pioneers in the field as Michael Myers as we delve into the impact that modern horror has had on the art of stalking. We'll also consider abstract challenges to long-held stalking principles, such as the John Hinckley paradox, while learning about exciting new techniques like the Weinstein maneuver. The Stalker's Handbook. Buy today and pay across 47 easy weekly installments. Operators are standing by.
And now back to the show.
And we are introduced to the blonde there very shortly. Daniel goes to the bar. And the blonde, by the way, played by Lucy Russell, who is actually the one actor or actress in this case who would go on to get future work. So, yay, good job, Lucy Russell.
She crushed. Good on her.
Granted, it was, she was good. Now, granted, that work was largely, it wasn't major studio films. She's not like a huge actress or anything like that. But it seems like she was able to carve a niche for herself and at least get some paid work. So, good on you, Lucy. So we have Daniel go to the bar. He does meet the blonde. She mentions that this club owner, who's supposed to be this badass guy, is her BF. And regardless, she still goes home with Danny. They have a couple drinks. They talk. And, once he kind of makes a move, she abruptly leaves. And I think that this is sort of where the film introduces...
Been there.
Haven't we all? And I think this is where the film sort of establishes itself as kind of a traditional noir, or brings in those traditional noir elements, right? Like you've got like the what do they call her? Like the seductive. It's not the damsel in distress. It's like the seductive one from like the Humphrey Bogart movies and stuff.
Like a femme fatale of sorts.
Yeah, that's the one. Thank you, femme fatale. So we've introduced her as the femme fatale.
Did you want to zhuzh that up with a shit accent? The femme fatale.
She is introduced as the femme fatale.
Femme fatale.
Femme fatale. Femme fatale.
Where does she get her hair done? At the Fatale Sassoon.
Let's just keep doing this longer, and so everybody turns it off if anybody is still listening after those. That's like some like want to hear the most annoying sound in the world shit right there.
Femme fatale.
And And then also, very shortly after that is where the film introduces the other sort of defining characteristic, which is its non-traditional narrative.
Buddy, look, this movie's only an hour long. It's all very shortly after that.
In the following scene. By the way, we've done that a lot less than we said we would at the top of the episode. So
you better ramp it up.
But no, just within terms of this is where the film introduces its non-traditional editing structure. Because right now it hasn't been that all over the place. And then this is all of a sudden where it's like, oh, okay, we're going way far into the future or possibly into the past here. But we see that now our protagonist, Danny, is in a suit. And he's got a swollen eye, and he's on the phone. And so obviously a lot of time has passed because last time we left him, he was still in his Robert Pattinson, Kurt Cobain phase in terms of his look. And we cut back to him for day one with said outfit. And we see him and Cobb go to Danny's house. Or his apartment anyways. And Cobb is actually pissed. He's like, who is this poor guy's house? Let's get the hell out of here, blah, blah, blah. Ryan, let me ask you, because I wasn't 100% certain. Did Cobb know that was his house or did he not? I didn't know if that was like...
So we find out later because he when he's in bed with the blonde, he says that poor sack even put a key under the doormat. Like I told him, all this shit. And he's like, he probably even bought the fucking doormat so he could have something to put a key under because that guy had nothing. Also, did you notice the Batman sticker on the door? I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, after that, we then cut back to Danny. He's in the suit, but his eye is okay. And he's watching the club guy. And shortly after that, he's in the apartment with the blonde. And, we then see him in a suit. And then we see him in a suit. He's talking to again. It feels weird to just keep calling her the blonde, but that's what she's called. So he's talking to the blonde.
That's fine.
And
there's no other women in this, so you can just say she or her, and we get it. Those are her pronouns, and that's her name as well.
And she's kind of sort of like trying to pump up on the audience's behalf. The club owner is this big badass antagonist. She's talking about him like smashing fingers and skulls and all that stuff because people owe money, which we're going to see later as well. And at this point, it's where Bill, he's walking through the bar and he finds the safe. They introduce the safe. We now know that it's in this club here. And that's when it cuts back to the past. And we see Bill and Cobb in the restaurant and the woman. So we didn't mention this, but there's earlier on when they were burgling the one house, when they're in the middle of it, like two people walk in, right? Ostensibly the people that live there. And they're like, what are you doing in our house? And they're like, oh, we're just here for the viewing, but it doesn't look like it's for us. Thanks later. And they're like, there's no viewing. What are you talking about? They're like, yeah, great place. Lovely. We'll make an offer later. And they bail. And so when this scene happens, the girl comes in, but it's with a different guy. And so,
into the restaurant. Or the bar.
Yeah, into the restaurant. Yeah. And Bill starts freaking out. And Cobb's like, no, that's a different guy. Don't worry. Like that time where she walked in on us, like she was actually like getting ready to cheat on her boyfriend with this other dude. So like she's never going to bring that up, right? Because it would potentially expose that. And Bill is still like, no, I don't know. And he's like, look, I'm telling you this is the case. But if it's really going to bother you that much, you should really consider changing your appearance. And it's after this that he changes his appearance. And then some of these jump cuts kind of start to justify themselves. So the one thing that I will tell you, Ryan, is, I don't know, I think we're about halfway through the film or so at this point. Obviously a short film.
Right.
And up until now, like a lot of the jump cuts, I wasn't certain that they were prepared to justify themselves. They felt a little loose and a little like, oh, we're just kind of doing this for the sake of doing it, a little Tarantino-y, etc. And this is the late 90s when people started doing this, messing with chronologies 5 years after Pulp Fiction. So I was kind of worried that maybe it was just going to be something that he did to make it a bit of a unique or different viewing experience. However, as the film goes on, you start to see where the cuts justify themselves. And there are certain times where not only did it sort of, work in and of itself, but where it would maybe even help speed up the pace, right? Because to be told in a traditional structure, in a traditional format, we would kind of have to give you certain details of the story to satisfy the logistics where maybe those aren't important to the story itself. But with jumping around, we can just sort of bypass a lot of that stuff and really just keep it to the meat, and get rid of a lot of that extraneous fat.
There's one scene in particular that I could think of, to your point, where he's literally on the ground spitting rubber gloves out of his mouth, where we see what, he's got the shit kicked out of him or something like that. It allows you to jump right into the middle of the action. And then we'll go back and so that helps the pacing, because it's like, we'll explain it later. We'll show you how we get there, because we can exposition dump after the action, but let's start with the action. And then we'll let that play out. And then when we need to go explain it, we'll jump back in time to another point of action, jump right into the middle of something happening, get into the middle of a scene, like the guy getting killed on the rug or, whatever. And then we'll let that scene play out. And then as it plays out, we'll get to the exposition, which will explain and justify either a previous or further scene down the road. But allowing, like you said, jumping around like that allows you to cut right into the middle of an action beat. So the second that your exposition starts to fizzle out, boom, you're, 20 days in the future or a week in the past. But now somebody's getting killed or getting their fingers smashed in or getting the shit kicked out of them, or you're getting, having sex or being robbed or whatever it is. But something's happening, so that it doesn't have to play linearly, because oftentimes in a linear situation, you have these big lulls, and you're checking your phone or whatever. I felt like Chris Nolan kept it on task, so that the second something would start to fizzle out, boom, you're being thrust. And it kind of forces you to pay attention, right? Because like with me, I was pretty engaged for most of the film. It didn't always work, but usually I'm sitting there trying to piece together, like, okay, when was this? He's got a beard, or he doesn't have a beard, or he's wearing this or whatever. So I'm trying to like fit in the timeline of, that's the game, right? With movies like this, whether it's like Old Boy or Inception or Memento or any of these, it's just kind of like, when did this happen? Which version of this character is this? So I thought it worked pretty well, especially for his first film. Like that's not an easy thing, I would imagine, to pull off.
Correct. No, I agree.
And taking it a step further, as we mentioned, this was shot on the weekends because these people all had day jobs. So just like when you're shooting these things sequentially over like a 6-week period or 4-week period or whatever for a film this size, I could imagine it would be a lot easier for consistency, or when this happened or when that happened or whatever. And then we'll put this there, and kind of lay it all out. But to keep track of all these different time jumps and time, and timelines of when we're going to reveal this to the audience, and he's got to maintain this level of beard and hairstyle over the course of an entire year, and keep that consistently. I could imagine, hats off. Like, that's got to be pretty difficult. Even if you shot it sequentially and you edited it out of order, that's still got to be tough.
Totally, man.
I know you had even mentioned that with your film Toast, you playing or acting in your film. It's like, man, I can't get a haircut, or I have to, go get a haircut because so much time has passed and I've got to do these pickup shots, and my hair was like this. So it all has to be very specific. You don't think about that shit when you watch a movie like this, but it's like, man, they might've shot these two scenes with, 8 months apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's shortly thereafter as well that we kind of learned the crux of the film, and that's that, largely this is Cobb sort of setting up Bill, and he's actually in cahoots with the blonde, right? So we get that scene where the two of them are in bed, and Cobb's trying to convince Bill, I think, to sell half of stolen goods as a running thing, and give him half or something like that, and he'll help him get some stolen goods. I wasn't 100% sure about that, but regardless, it's not that important, because what ends up happening is that the blonde is actually going to convince Bill/Danny to work with her. Now, this is also sort of where we start to jump around and see that Bill does ultimately successfully rob the safe. Whether or not he gets away with it remains to be seen, but it cuts to Bill, and he's inside the club. The safe is open, and he's taping money around his body, right? That he's going to put his clothes over and, walk out of the club. And, this guard walks in, sees it, goes to make a move, and Bill has a hammer that he's been taking with him, and he bludgeons the guard to death. And I think this is, again, Brian, to your point earlier, an example of the effective quickening of pace, and just sort of some misdirection, setting up reveals by giving you information up front that makes it seem one way, and then you go back and it's like, but really, here's this little wrinkle. And so he does that pretty well. It's not a ton of balls to juggle in the air. Like there's not like a ton of, it's not twist after twist after twist, and he has to like resolve like a ton of things. But he set himself up for success. He didn't bite off more than he could chew, but he made sure to bite off enough to keep himself fed and to keep us fed as an audience. So it was a nice balance in that respect. And the blonde convinces Danny to steal the money. Not necessarily by just, saying that they could, live rich and run off together and all that sort of stuff that happens, but also by claiming that she had very sensitive photos taken of her and that these photos are sealed in an envelope in the safe as well. And so by going and knocking off the safe, he can take the photos, rescue those so they don't get shown, as well as take the money. They can split it and, right off into the sunset as they're going to do. Now, that's not really what ends up happening, obviously, because we saw that, they're in cahoots, the blonde and Cobb. We saw that, he got almost beaten up by the guard, but then was able to turn that around. But he does actually get his ass beaten in the next scene by Cobb. So he's going to meet him on the roof, and Cobb ends up beating the crap out of him. Ryan, I wanted to ask you, do you think did Cobb beat him up to steal his money, or because, which we didn't mention, because Danny ended up sleeping with the blonde, or do you think that it was like retribution for both? What exactly do you think was the impetus for him like going off on him like that?
I took it as, again, this movie is a theme of layers of control. And I thought that at this point, Danny was he needed to be reined back in. Like he was feeling very confident and out doing his own thing. Ultimately, Cobb had his own plan for Danny that comes to see its way through to the very end. They end up winning on this one. But I think that it was to, because, if you don't have that scene, right, then this movie just plays out linearly the way that we're describing. And this plot line sees its way to the end. Danny gets the money. He's got the photos, this and that. But you need to upset that and kind of set Danny back a little bit so that then he goes down the other path, which ultimately leads him to his own demise of sorts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So it was a bit of a course correction for me. Like Cobb needed to use his power over this situation to course correct Danny to get him to go down this other path at this fork in the road, so that he, would ultimately serve Cobb's purpose, which wasn't the money at all.
Correct. Yeah, it gets him to, create that separation. Like, hey, like me and you aren't friends anymore. And by doing this, I'm going to make you respond this way, which is going to set you down a path that I need you to go through because I'm setting you up to take the fall for him.
It puts him on his back foot a little bit, It makes him act defensively instead of offensively, which is at this point in the plot line where, he's at in his career, is he's acting offensively. He feels like he's got a pretty good handle on his skill set. Based on what he's learned from Cobb and practiced. And now he's going to apply that to help the blonde achieve her needs. He's like, I'll use my superpowers for good, basically, more or less, to help her see her thing through, get those pictures back, get a little money in the process. And then we'll make this, it's the trademark, this is my last job, and then I'm out, I'm done after this.
Yeah, right.
And then, that's never the case. That's kind of the trope. And then this is the all is lost moment, that you kind of get as you turn the corner into Act 3. So,
yeah, definitely. And again, I think that all of these sort of plot points that we're hitting are very reminiscent of noir, the traditional noir storytelling and all of those beats and plot points, etc., and character tropes and all of that. So, just, making sure to hit those along the way as well. Now, after this is kind of when the big reveal comes up, actually, and it's, pretty much the end of the film. And along the way, it's basically been a matter of, okay, we understand that Bill is being set up by the blonde and Cobb. They're in cahoots. Bill doesn't know it. Bill thinks that he and the blonde are getting themselves set up to go have, a future together, and they're going to ride off into the sunset. And he's just getting played the whole time. Now, there's still this other element, twist on twist, right? That ends up being the case with Cobb when all is said and done. So through the interview with the cop, because, coming back here at the end, going back to the fact that we had this interview setup, which really, I don't really think we jump back to the interview during the middle of the film. I think it's just bookending it at the beginning and end, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's like an interrogation,
so,
more or less.
Yeah. So here at the end, this is where it's revealed that Cobb was in fact setting Danny up the entire time. And really, it turns out that whereas Danny thought that he was being trained by Cobb so that he could, learn his ways and, do what he does and follow in his footsteps and they have a friendship, et cetera, we find out that Cobb's been manipulating him the entire time and that he was really training him to be exactly like him so that all of the clues would lead to Danny, right? If
he needed
Cobb
a patsy.
makes these moves, exactly, Cobb makes these moves, but they're the exact same moves that Danny's making because he taught them to him. Ergo, I can pin my stuff on Danny and it's going to look like he did it and not me, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of like what he was up to the entire time. However, it's then also revealed that on top of that, there's been a murder. And we find out very quickly that the blonde was in fact murdered and that this as well was all part of Cobb's plan to take all of the money, I assume, right? Is that kind of what the whole thing was?
I guess, yeah. That was the motivations for Cobb were kind of that's where I got lost a little bit, because at this point we're doing time jumps and we're zooming in and zooming out, between these different characters and layers of power and control and manipulation. So at a certain point, I did get a little tripped up. I will say Chris Nolan did an excellent job. You're absolutely right. He didn't bite off more than he could chew. But I did get a little confused here and there, which I think is normal. And sometimes, movies like this warrant a rewatch and are appreciated more on the second ride through, because you realize you were given these nuggets and you just weren't picking up on it because you did. I'll even take it a step further and ask you, in the beginning of the film, were we even told that was an interrogation by a police officer? Or am I correct in remembering that it almost starts off like he's telling a story to somebody, or like you said, it's an interview of sorts, and it could be anything from media, press, police, a friend, or anything. I think that the police portion of it was left very obscured in the front part of the film, and then in the back part of the film, it's revealed he's actually being interrogated. Is that correct?
I mean, yes and no. I think that you could assume that he's being interviewed, if not interrogated, by someone, but that maybe it's not necessarily 100% clear, because he kind of asks him clarifying questions about like shadowing people.
Right.
It was actually, that was the clip that we actually heard at the top of the episode.
Right.
And
so,
you hear the cop kind of asking clarifying questions like, oh, so then, did you follow women? And he's like, no, I didn't follow women.
Correct.
It wasn't sexual. It was just a thing I did. So you kind of, like I said, he's being interviewed, if not necessarily interrogated.
Well, so to me, I thought it was almost like it was I took that when I first started watching the film, I thought it was like a Tony Soprano talking to his therapist situation where he was like more or less trying to work through some things. Like, I have this problem. Oh, let's hear about it. Well, I like to follow people, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to tell you about it. And we're going to go down this story. The movie's called Following. I thought it was about voyeurism that maybe goes wrong, or he follows the wrong person, a criminal and he gets wrapped up in this shit, or whatever. Sure. But then when we get to the end, we find out that he's actually on the hook for some shit, and he was brought in and he's trying to give his alibi, more or less. But I didn't really take it as that until the end. And I thought that was kind of another level where I got the rug kind of pulled out from under me. I was like, oh shit, you're fucked.
I had that to a degree, because I didn't necessarily assume that he was being interrogated as a primary suspect.
Okay.
I thought it was something where he was maybe being interrogated for information, right? Like Cobb pulled off this thing and then he went missing, and you were seen with him at this place and blah, 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 or eyewitnesses say you were with him. Can you tell us what's going on? Like, I didn't realize that they were there to specifically interrogate and accuse him of murder.
Because I could be way wrong on this, but I don't remember anything in the opening of the film that was very descriptive of like a police station or, it was, I believe if I remember, it was shot very tight on both their faces.
It was.
And
no, I think the therapist or psychologist was a fair assumption because it's like a folder that they're in and they're writing.
Right.
So it's going to be one of the two, like depending on what you're kind of more familiar with or what's on your mind, you're either going to interpret that as either being like a psychological matter or a police procedural matter, right? Like it could equally be both.
so maybe that's
I think it's fair to
a bit of
assume
a
either.
cinematic Rorschach test of like, do you see a cop or do you see a therapist? It's like, no, I see a therapist. Like, well, that's telling. Let's talk about that. Or I see a cop. Oh, that's telling. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, right. I feel like either is just as loaded as the other.
Right. So you saw a cop. I saw a therapist. I think that's very telling about yours and I's personalities.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man.
Awesome.
Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, that's pretty much like that was the only thing that I didn't realize. I think that the idea is that he took the money from Daniel when he like beat the crap out of him, basically. And like I think he was probably, it could be a thing where maybe he was up there waiting for the blonde and then Cobb shows up. And he is like, oh, what are you doing here? I thought it was going to be the blonde. And he's like, it's me, bitch. And then he beats the crap out of him and takes the money that he was going to split with the blonde and then bails away, right? Like I could definitely see that
Who's
being
using
the
who?
case.
Right.
And then, yeah, and then he goes back to the blonde and he's like, hey, good news. I got our money. And she's like, great. And he's like, bad news is I'm here to kill you. The money's on mine. Bam, bitch.
And he's been using
And then he
everybody all
leaves,
along.
right?
Right.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's again, touching on those noir and neo-noir tropes, right? The bad guy's always one step ahead, and just when you think you've got it figured out, he's got one more trick up his sleeve,
Kaiser
right?
Sose moment, right?
yeah, that where it turns out that he was one step ahead of everyone the entire time, even more than we initially thought, right?
Yeah, I mean, the prequel to this film could very easily be Cobb having worked for that gangster guy or having been wronged by him or having an interaction with him. And he's like, I'm going to get him. And so he uses the ex-girlfriend to get to him and then sets her up by saying, we're going to get this patsy to take the fall. And then, works its way backwards, if you were to play this out linearly.
Totally.
Until he gets the best of everybody in a very Danny Ocean kind of way, but with more death.
Dude, you know what we need is $150 million Warner Brothers produced prequel to Following. Because that's all the rage these days.
I don't think we do. How about that?
It'll be a big grand musical. It'll be just like all over the place.
Yeah.
Batshit crazy, as we like to say. Banana pants crazy.
The leading. We'll call it the leading. The leading and the following. The coming and the going.
And then, and then as far as, the narrative wrapping itself up, we do see that a lot of the actions and plans that Cobb made over the course of the movie were all designed to lead up to this moment where the cops would be investigating him. And so, there was, and I will admit, for example, like I didn't quite understand the earring, right? Like I know the earring was a plant, but like, did you know why that pinned the murder on him? Is it because it was in his house?
Yeah.
Did he plant the earring in his house?
Yeah, they found the earring at his place, and
okay.
and she was
I thought it
wearing
like
the
another
other
house
one.
that they were burgling.
So
got it. Yeah. So and then he also like made sure to take her panties and put them in like the keepsake box. So yeah, so that makes sense. Then all of this was designed so that they would find belongings that were actually on the victim's person, right? In the form of this earring and panties, etc. Just to really lay out the evidence.
yeah, because Cobb made it seem so casual. Like, isn't this fun? And then in the end, it's like, you have all this shit in your fucking house, dipshit. It's like red flag after red flag. Like, how do you have one earring and a pair of panties? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Dude, I feel like that's how like the trap house starts, right? Or the safe house rather. It's like, hey, like let me just, cops are on me. Let me just keep this 8-ball over here. Oh, that's fine. Just go ahead and stash it over there, right? And then like a couple days later, like, oh man, they're on to me. I've got this ounce. Can I just like bury it in your floorboards? Like, I'll give you the profits of half. And you're like, oh, okay. And then next thing you know, you just got people coming in and out of your house all day long.
Some training
You're trying
day
to keep
shit.
like your wife and your kid from finding out, and it's a slippery slope. Breaking Bad taught us this.
Speaking of which, Jason, I've got some strawberry candies I need you to hold on to. It's just for the weekend. It's not for long, dude. I'll take them back. In the meantime, help yourself to as many as you want. But I'm gonna have a package sent to you. Just sign for it. It'll be fine.
Excellent. To all the listeners, don't tell Ryan I'm going to cob him. I'm going to make the candy business my own, but I'm going to make it seem like I'm helping him out along the way. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Listeners, don't tell Jason. I don't give a shit about this podcast. I'm just using it as an alibi to show that we're friends, so nobody assumes that I'm setting him up on the plant of strawberry candies.
Everybody listening. No, I'm just kidding.
Jason can't hear me when I'm talking like this.
When you hear this, we're talking into a tin can with a string connected to the microphone that only you can hear.
This is my inner monologue. We're such idiots.
And then, Ryan, after that, Cobb disappears into the crowded streets of London, never to be seen again, much like a man who learns he has cancer walking into the ocean, right? Just going off into a crowded sea, never to return.
Like the ghosts in Field of Dreams.
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And that's it. That's following. That's all 70 minutes of following.
Which also is filled with corn cobs. Lots of cobs going around, disappearing in the cob. Yep. You're welcome, everybody.
Quick, Morty, we've got to leave. Everything's on a cob. We can't live here. Let's leave now.
We're in the cob universe.
I still love that. That the worst thing in the universe was things being on a cob. It was like idyllic and perfect, but it's like, no, everything's on a cob. Quick, let's go. Watch Rick and Morty if you don't know what we're talking about, people.
Well, they should call this movie Blonde on a Cob.
Why?
It doesn't matter. Moving on.
Blonde on a cob. Jesus. Well, Ryan, we've still got a couple housekeeping items to go over here, not the least of which is 3 adjectives. Why don't you go ahead and give us yours, bud?
All right. So my first one is textbook. This is textbook Chris Nolan. Right down to the one thing we didn't talk about, which is the ticking clock score. Did you pick up on that? Right out of Dunkirk / Inception / Memento / The Dark Knight. It opens with
apparently, so everything he's ever done, apparently.
Dude, this movie opens with, as he's fiddling around that box that you talked about in our opening sequence, tick, 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 tick. I was like, dude, this is like the opening to Dark Knight when they're doing the bank heist. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is the entire score to Dunkirk. Wait a minute. I had my own personal everything on a cob moment. So, this is very textbook. Not in a bad way, by the way. Which leads me to my next one, which is promising. This Chris Nolan kid's going somewhere. We've said it before. We'll say it again. I think this kid's got a lot of promise. Can't wait to see what he's made next. Oh, wait. Everything? Awesome. So, that leads me to my next one, which is no notes, which is as literal as can be. I'm looking at a very blank page of notes. I don't really have a lot to say about this film. Is it the best version of this? No. Is it promising? Yeah. I thought they did a lot very well in the days before YouTube tutorials. I couldn't even find any evidence that Chris Nolan went to film school. I think he got his degree in English literature. So I think he's more of a writer than anything else.
He did not actually.
Right.
No, he taught himself everything he knows.
Fucking rock star. My early work does not look like this. Right? I promise you that. So, and he did like everything. It was like him and Emma Thompson and a couple other people. So, or not Emma Thompson, Emma, what's her nuts?
It was Emma Thomas, which,
yes.
By the way, if you didn't know, Emma Thomas is now called Emma Nolan.
Oh, did she swap out?
Yep.
Dig it.
Yep. Yep. She produced the film. They got hitched afterwards, and then Nolan made a bunch of money, and she turned out to bet on the right horse.
Well, I knew they were hitched. I just didn't know she took his last name. I thought she was still Emma Thomas, but regardless, either way, yeah, I believe she is still Emma Thomas. They have their production company, Syncope Inc., and Emma Thomas Nolan. Okay, so we're both right. Hey, we're both right. That never happens.
Hey,
love that.
Yep.
What a test of a good marriage, right? Like, hey, we're gonna go make this feature film over the course of the year and spend all our money on, film stock and editing. You can make it through that,
right? That's how you know. If you can survive making a film together, you can survive anything.
You don't deserve me at my dark night if you can't handle me at my following. I've always said that.
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and give you my 3 adjectives here. My first one is clever because I thought it was pretty ingenious the way that they pulled off a lot of the edits. Like I said, I thought they were going to be kind of superfluous and unmotivated to start off, but they ended up being really well justified, and I like the way that they pulled everything off. Efficient. This is lean filmmaking at its best, $6,000. That won't even get you, 3 months of rent anymore. So to make a whole entire ass feature film on that, back in the 90s, especially too, when they had to buy film stock. I mean, I'm sure 5 of that 6 was just film stock.
Dude, they didn't even have non-linear editing systems back then. You had to do this on like an Avid or, Steamback or something like that. Like I wouldn't even know how to begin to make a movie in 98. So good on them.
Yeah. And then manageable, which is to say that they took a manageable bite, right? I mentioned it before. Didn't bite off more than they can chew. They made sure that they were going to tell a pretty, complex story, or not really a complex story. They were going to utilize complex devices to tell us a rather simple story. And I think that's why this film succeeds.
Sure.
They knew this was their first film. They knew they had everything going against them. Just getting it done and completed is a challenge in and of itself, let alone making it any good along the way. So clever, efficient, and manageable. For me, Ryan, that's going to result in a star rating of 3.5 out of 5. I'm giving them a little bit of extra love for being a first film made for absolutely no money.
Right.
And in terms of the viewing experience, maybe a little bit closer to 3, but a little bit of extra love taking into account everything else that factored in. 3.5 out of 5 stars. What do you have for a grade rating, Ryan?
Giving them a C+. Kind of in that same vein. I thought, if nothing else, I give them a lot of credit too for getting in and getting out. They didn't overstay their welcome. They knew what they had. So, it was brief. It was to the point. It was succinct. It was very well done, very well shot. Didn't blow my mind, but really, really good starter film.
Absolutely. And that wraps up our discussion for following. Now, before we continue to the end of the show nonsense that I like to say, we do have a new sort of feature that we've been talking to you guys about, and that's our listener mailbox, the Esoterica Cinema hotline, right? And we really want you guys to call in, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about anything and everything under the sun, but we thought it might be fun to sort of give you some specific prompts and have you call in. So to anybody listening, we're going to introduce a new feature at the end of the show now called Question of the Day. I know, clever, right? We paid a copywriter a lot of money to come up with that one. May come up with a more clever title for it down the road, but for now, Question of the Day. And we're going to pose a question to you guys listening that pertains to the episode we just discussed. And we want you to call in. The number for the hotline, by the way, I'll give it to you again at the end, is 818-483-6285. You call that, you'll hear my voice, you leave a message, we will edit that, and we will get you on future episodes. So for today's question, with following famously made for $6,000, we want to know, what is your favorite low-budget film? And for the purposes of this question, we are setting a threshold of $1 million. So any film made for $1 million or less, what is your favorite? Call us at Esoterica Cinema on the hotline. Let us know. We'll get you on the air. 818-483-6285. You listening, call and let me know what is your favorite low-budget film. Hopefully we get some fun responses there, Ryan. And as far as where you can hit us up, now here's the thing. As far as the question of the day, too, you don't have to strictly call in. We would love for you to call in. We love hearing your guys' beautiful voices and sharing them with the world. But we are able to be reached a number of different places. First one we have is social medias, right? So primarily Twitter and Instagram at Esoterica Cinema. And then we also have our website, esotericacinema.com, where you can go on and actually, there's a contact us button at the bottom left or the bottom right, but either way at the bottom of your screen, and that'll link directly to us. And then, of course, we do have our Gmail account, esotericacinema@gmail.com, and you can write in and let us know what do you think about anything that we've talked about, or you can answer our question of the day. What is your favorite low-budget film made for less than $1 million? So we'd love to hear from you. Please do check us out. And as far as the website is concerned, we made a little bit of a facelift, so you can listen to all of the episodes on our dedicated web player, which we have a link to there. You can listen to the last 3 episodes right there on the site towards the top of the page. And then you can also access our master list. It's right there on the website. You can scan through all 3 pages without having to download it, though you can still download it as a PDF if you like. And of course, the master list is where we pull all of our films from at the end of the episode, including the film that we're going to pull right now.
Yes! One of my favorite parts of the episode.
I love it so much. You know, it always gets me excited for the week to 2 weeks to come and see what film I'm going to have to look forward to, because obviously all of the films that are on here are films that we look forward to in some form or another. And it's funny because, once again, you know, to remind everybody, or perhaps any new listeners, this film list is all over the place, right? Like, we've got classics from Stanley Kubrick like 2001. We've got B-grade genre crap like Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dweller. We've got some classic, you know, 70s romance, drama, you know, Harold and Maude. We've got classics in One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. Just a banger list. A lot of animation, too, as well. Right now, I'm looking at The Secret of NIMS. So you can go ahead to go to esotericacinema.com and play along at the end of the episode to see what we are going to pull. So, as always, we're going to consult our random.org, true random number generator. And we have a number 1 through 200 that corresponds to all of the movies on the list. We select our button right now, and as the wheel turns, we come back on number 43. 43. So if you go to your list right now, because you're on the website or you've got it downloaded, and you go to 43, it's going to be an E film. Now, right before that at 42, we have one of Tim Burton's best films in Ed Wood, always a classic. And we also missed on the other side of this, Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void, which is a head trip movie that I've always wanted to see and never has. For now, we're going back to Mr. Alexander Payne's second film, if my memory serves me best.
Yeah, baby.
And we are going to look at Election, starring Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, I'm so happy to get to watch this again. I have not seen this in years.
So, funny thing, I haven't seen this in years either. This was, I think, probably, 20 years ago, something like that. Maybe even 25 at this point. Like, it's a long time.
Oddly enough, this is another 1999 movie. We're doing 2 back-to-back.
Nice, man. Interesting. And the funny thing, so I actually remember back in the day, like, not liking this film as much as everyone else. It was a film that I thought was okay at the time, but I didn't really embrace it the way that a lot of other people
I love this
did.
movie.
Now, the Alexander Payne film that I really gravitated towards was Sideways. And I think that we've got that on a backup list, and maybe, for season 4, we can end up getting that in here because that's a good one. But I think I saw it just the one time, and that was that. So going back to the movie now, 20, 25 years later, as an adult especially, I'm really looking forward to seeing if the film resonates with me further, or if I have the same reaction.
My life has just been littered with Tracy Flicks, played by Reese Witherspoon. So I can just so relate. In the same way that you could relate to Salieri, I relate to Matthew Broderick's character in this film so much. So this is my Amadeus. When I saw this, I immediately just attached myself to this character, where it's like, oh, would you just stop tormenting me? So I do have a quick synopsis here on Google. that reads, Jim McAllister, played by Matthew Broderick, a well-liked high school government teacher, can't help but notice that successful student Tracy Flick, played by Reese Witherspoon, uses less than ethical tactics to get what she wants. When Tracy runs for school president, Jim feels that she will be a poor influence on the student body and convinces Paul, a dim-witted but popular student athlete, to run against Tracy. When she becomes aware of Jim's secret involvement in the race, a bitter feud is sparked. Yeah. From 99, directed by Alexander Payne, all the things you said. Can't wait to watch this again and discuss it with you. I hope there's enough meat on this bone to really tackle this from a filmmaking standpoint. I would dare say that Alexander Payne is enough of an auteur at this point that we can get into this
I would
a little
think
bit.
so.
Yeah. Are you a fan of many of his other films?
So I'm trying to recall. I don't know that I really stuck with him too much after Sideways, and I can't for the life of me remember what his first film was, but I feel like it was noteworthy. Do you remember? It's not Bottle Rocket because that's Wes Anderson, but it's like in that vein.
Citizen Ruth?
Was that his first?
Yeah.
With Laura Dern?
Looks like Citizen Ruth.
Yeah, I never saw that one.
And then Election was his second, believe it or not.
Yeah, I did remember that it was his second film. So yeah, so I never saw Citizen Ruth. I didn't see anything after Sideways. So to answer your question, no. But again, I love Sideways, and I know this film has a very solid reputation. And I know that he was kind of in that discussion, but just outside of being one of the, top tier auteurs.
Yeah, it looks like Citizen Ruth, Election, and then About Schmidt, and then Sideways.
About Schmidt, that's the other one I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
I knew there was one other noteworthy film. That was another one that I never checked out. Some people said it was really good. Some people said it was meh. I don't know why I never really got around to that one, but I would like to go back and check out that one, I think.
Yeah. I kind of remember that being somewhat meh as well. But I would also like to go back and watch that. I always get Alexander Payne mixed up with David O. Russell. Those are the two that I kind of cross streams. You mentioned Wes Anderson. They're all kind of like in that same auteur ilk, graduating class.
Yeah,
they all had these
came out around the
weird
same
little
time.
quirky movies coming out at the same exact times. Time period or whatever. Because I always think Alexander Payne directed I Heart Huckabees, and he did not. That was David O. Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. Well, looking forward to it. So to everybody who is listening, go ahead and check out Alexander Payne's Election, and we will see you on the next episode of Esoterica Cinema. Thanks for listening.